Rich Dad Poor Dad. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad was first published in 1997 and quickly became a must-read for people interested in investing, money, and the global economy. The book has become the #1 personal finance book of all time. The overarching theme of Rich Dad Poor Dad is how to use money as a tool for wealth development. It destroys the myth that the rich are born rich, explains why your personal residence may not really be an asset, describes the real difference between an asset and a liability, and much more. Rich Dad Poor Dad contains a total of 10 chapters plus the introduction. Introduction. The book is written from Kiyosaki's perspective of how Rich Dad went about making money and the mistakes that Poor Dad made. Robert Kiyosaki had two main influential fathers in his life. Poor Dad was Kiyosaki's biological father, a man who was highly intelligent and very well educated. Poor Dad believed in studying hard and getting good grades, then finding a well-paying job. Yet, despite these seemingly positive attributes, Poor Dad didn't do well financially. Rich Dad was the father of Kiyosaki's best friend. He had a similar work ethic to Kiyosaki's real dad, but with a twist. Rich Dad believed in financial education, learning how money works, and understanding how to make money work for you. Although he was an 8th grade dropout, Rich Dad eventually became a millionaire by putting the power of money to work for him. Chapter 1. The Rich Don't Work for Money. Oftentimes people misunderstand the title of this chapter, and mistakenly believe that it means the rich don't work. In fact, the complete opposite is true. Instead of reading the chapter title as, The Rich Don't Work for Money, what Kiyosaki means to say is that, the rich don't work for money. Note that by putting the emphasis on the word, money, this section takes on an entirely different meaning. The truth is that the majority of rich people do work very hard, but they go about it differently than most people do. Rich people, and people who want to become rich, work and learn every day how to put money to work for them. As Rich Dad says, the poor and middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Kiyosaki also notes that having a regular job is just a short-term solution to the long-term problem, or challenge, of creating wealth and financial freedom. It's fear that keeps most people working at a job. The fear of not paying their bills, the fear of being fired, the fear of not having enough money, and the fear of starting over. That's the price of studying to learn a profession or trade, and then working for money. Most people become a slave to money, and then get angry at their boss. Chapter 2. Why teach financial literacy? The second chapter of Rich Dad Poor Dad explains the difference between an asset and a liability. Chapter 2 drives home the point that it's not about how much money you make, but about how much money you keep. An asset is something that has value, that produces income or appreciates, and has a market where the asset can easily be bought and sold. Assets produce income. Assets appreciate. Assets do both. Conversely, liabilities take money out of your pocket because of the costs associated with them. When Rich Dad Poor Dad was first published back in 1997, Kiyosaki created a lot of controversy with this statement. That's because by definition, a personal residence isn't an asset unless it appreciates enough to offset the costs of ownership. On the other hand, rental property is an asset because it can generate enough passive income to exceed the expenses of operating and financing the real estate. As Kiyosaki writes in Chapter 2 of Rich Dad Poor Dad, want to grow rich? Concentrate your efforts on buying income-producing assets, when you truly understand what an asset is. Keep liabilities and expenses low. You'll deepen your asset column. Chapter 3. Mind your own business. There are two key messages in this chapter. First, pay off your debts and start investing in income-producing assets as soon as possible. Next, stay financially healthy by spending your time, instead of your paycheck, and investing as much of your money as possible in assets. Kiyosaki notes in Chapter 3 that most people confuse their profession with their business. In other words, they spend their entire lives working in somebody else's business and making other people rich. One of my favorite quotes from this section is, the primary reason the majority of the poor and middle class are fiscally conservative is that they have no financial foundation. They have to cling to their jobs and play it safe. They can't afford to take risks. Chapter 4. The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. When reading this chapter, it's important to keep in mind that Kiyosaki wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad as a motivational book, not to provide expert financial or tax advice. For example, Kiyosaki writes about the time he bought a Porsche and treated it as a business expense, using before-tax dollars. Buying a high-end luxury car when a much less expensive make and model would do could put an investor on the fast track to an IRS audit. But putting the Porsche aside, the points made in this chapter discuss how to play the investment game smart. The rich understand the power of company structures and the tax code and use every legal means they can to minimize their tax burden. Compare how business owners and investors with corporations such as C Corps, S Corps, or LLCs pay taxes to how most people pay tax. Business owners with a corporate structure earn, spend, pay taxes. Employees who work for corporations earn, pay taxes, spend. Notice that employees who work for somebody else spend their money post-tax, while business owners earn and spend before paying tax. This chapter also covers the four main components of what Kiyosaki calls financial IQ, accounting, investment strategy, market law, and law. Understanding the legal and tax advantages significantly contribute to building long-term wealth. For instance, a corporation can pay expenses before paying taxes, whereas an employee gets taxed first and must try to pay expenses on what is left. Corporations also offer legal protection from lawsuits. When someone sues a wealthy individual, they are often met with layers of legal protection and often find that the wealthy person actually owns nothing, in their own name. They control everything, but personally own nothing. Chapter 5. The rich invent money. Inventing money means finding opportunities or deals that other people don't have the skill, knowledge, resources, or contacts for. In Chapter 5, Rich Dad Poor Dad explains there are two types of investors. 1. Investment packages are bought by people who entrust their money to a developer or fund manager. This is the way that most people invest, such as buying shares of an ETF or putting money into a real estate crowdfunding venture. 2. Professional investors look after their own investments, research the market to find deals that make sense, then hire professionals to manage the daily oversight. Professional investors have three things in common. Identify opportunities that other people have not found. Raise funds for investment. Work with other intelligent people. Here's one of my favorite closing thoughts from this chapter. Some people argue that there aren't real estate bargains where they are, but there are prime opportunities everywhere that are overlooked. Most people aren't trained financially to recognize the opportunities in front of them. Chapter 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. Poor Dad was intelligent and well educated and worked for money because job security meant everything to him. Rich Dad became a millionaire by working to learn. As Kiyosaki writes, I recommend to young people to seek work for what they will learn, more than what they will earn. Look down the road at what skills they want to acquire before choosing a specific profession and before getting trapped in the rat race. In fact, that's exactly what Kiyosaki did. He joined the Marines after graduating from college and learned the essential business skills of leading and managing people. After serving his country, Kiyosaki joined Xerox, overcame his fear of rejection to become one of the top 5 salespeople in the company, then left the corporate world to form his own business. Chapter 6 of Rich Dad Poor Dad then discusses the synergy of management skills needed for success in business. Cash flow management, systems management, people management, overcoming obstacles. Chapter 7 of Rich Dad Poor Dad begins by noting that the primary difference between a rich person and a poor person is how they manage fear. Robert Kiyosaki isn't talking about the type of fear that some people have when going to the dentist or watching The Exorcist. In the book, Fear is about the fear of losing money and how to handle that fear. It's one of the 5 biggest obstacles people face on the path to becoming financially independent. Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance. These roadblocks, and the failure to overcome them, are why people who have studied and achieved financial literacy are still unable to develop assets that generate plentiful amounts of cash flow. Rich Dad Poor Dad suggests filtering negative people and their fears out of your life. Instead, concentrate on the big picture and always ask, what's in it for me? Getting started. In Chapter 8, Rich Dad Poor Dad tells us that there is gold everywhere, most people are not trained to see it. Part of this lack of vision and clarity comes from the world we live in. We're trained from a very young age to work hard for someone else, spend the money that we earn, and borrow more if we run short. Unfortunately, people who choose to become one of the masses never take the time to develop their financial genius. Investing in real estate is the perfect example. The average person can spend a week out in the field and find nothing, while the investor who has trained himself can easily find 4 or 5 deals that make sense in a single day. Here are the 10 steps to follow to develop your financial genius and discover the gold that's already out there, just waiting to be found. Have a deep emotional reason or purpose for doing what you do, a combination of wants and don't wants. Understand the power of choice and choose daily what to do, including choosing the right habits and educating yourself. Choose your friends carefully by leveraging the power of association, being careful not to listen to poor or frightened people. Master the power of learning quickly and develop a formula for making money. Pay yourself first by mastering the power of self-discipline to manage your cash flow, people, and personal time. Select great people for your team and compensate them generously for their advice, because the more money they make, the more money you will make. Ask, how fast do I get my money back? By focusing on return of investment first, followed by return on investment. Use money generated by assets you own to buy luxuries by focusing on self-discipline to direct money to create more. Have a role model to follow and tap into the power of their genius to put to your use. Realize that if you want something, you need to give something first. Chapter 9. Kiyosaki pulls the key lessons of the book together into a checklist of actions you can start taking today. Stop doing what you're doing by taking a break and assessing what is and isn't working. Look for new ideas by finding resources on different and unique subjects. Find a mentor who's been where you're going, take them to lunch and pick their brain. Always be learning by taking classes, attending seminars, and reading. Make lots of offers, always with escape clauses, because eventually someone will say, yes. Spend 10 minutes each month for the next 12 months walking, running, or driving a certain area and looking for changes that create bargains. Shop for real estate deals when the market corrects, because profits are made when buying, not when selling. Learn how, when, and where to buy by investing in your education. Think bigger to get richer, because small thinkers don't get the big breaks. Most people only look for what they can afford, so buy a bigger pie and cut it into pieces by finding a buyer first, then a seller. Negotiate volume discounts by thinking big, pulling people together, and buying in bulk. Read and learn from history, because history always repeats itself. Action always beats inaction.